I never thought I'd question my own sanity until that rainy afternoon in October, when a complete stranger sat down across from me in a dimly lit coffee shop and started reciting details from my life that no one else could possibly know, not even my closest friends. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get any weirder, he leaned in closer and whispered about tomorrow, about things that hadn't happened yet, but somehow felt inevitable. My name is Madeline Crawford, I'm 38 years old, and I live in a quiet coastal town in Maine called Whispering Pines, where the fog rolls in thick from the Atlantic and secrets seem to hide in every shadow. I've always been the practical type, a high school English teacher who grades papers late into the night, sips chamomile tea to unwind, and avoids anything that smells like superstition. But that day, everything changed, and now I can't shake the feeling that my life was never truly my own. It started innocently enough, or at least that's how I try to remember it. The sky was heavy with storm clouds, the kind that make the world feel smaller and more oppressive. I ducked into the Foggy Lantern, our local café, to escape the downpour while waiting for my car's oil change at the garage down the street. The place was half empty, the air thick with the scent of fresh brewed coffee and damp wool coats. I settled into a corner booth, nursing a latte and scrolling through my phone, mindlessly checking emails from students about missed assignments. That's when he appeared. He was an older man, maybe in his late 60s, with a weathered face framed by a gray beard and eyes that seemed too sharp, like they could cut through fog. He wore a faded trench coat, water dripping from its hem, and carried no umbrella, as if the rain didn't bother him at all. Without a word, he slid into the seat opposite me, his gaze locking onto mine with an intensity that made my skin prickle. At first, I thought he was just another eccentric local. Whispering Pines has its share of odd folks, drawn here by the isolation or the old lighthouse rumors. But then he spoke, his voice low and gravelly, like wind rustling through dead leaves. "Madeline," he said, not asking, but stating it as fact. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't introduced myself. My name wasn't on my cup or anything visible. I forced a polite smile, the kind you give to strangers who might be harmless but set off quiet alarms in your head. "Excuse me?" I replied, glancing around for the barista or anyone who might notice if things got uncomfortable. He didn't smile back. Instead, he folded his hands on the table, veins prominent like twisted roots, and continued, "You were born in Boston, but your family moved here when you were 7. After your father's accident at the shipyard. He never walked right again, did he? Spent his days staring out at the sea, muttering about lost opportunities." I froze, my latte halfway to my lips. How could he know that? My father's injury was a family secret, buried deep in old photo albums and hushed conversations. We'd left the city for the cheaper life in Whispering Pines, but I rarely talked about it. The man didn't stop. "You married young, at 22. To Thomas Crawford, the boy from the neighboring farm. He was kind, wasn't he? Built you that bookshelf in the living room with his own hands. But the cancer took him 5 years ago, slow and unforgiving, leaving you with that empty house on Elm Street." My breath caught in my throat. Thomas's death was public record, sure, but the bookshelf? That was a private memory, something I'd only shared in my journal, pages tucked away in a drawer no one ever opened. The cafe suddenly felt colder, the rain pattering against the windows like insistent fingers tapping for attention. I wanted to leave, to bolt out into the storm, but my legs felt heavy, rooted to the spot by some invisible force. Who was this man? A stalker? Someone from my past I'd forgotten? He leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing as if peering into my soul. "You think about him every night, don't you? Lying in that big bed, listening to the waves crash against the cliffs. And lately, you've been having those dreams, the ones where you're walking through an endless forest, branches scratching at your arms, calling out for someone who never answers." A chill ran down my spine, raising goosebumps on my arms. Those dreams had started a month ago, vivid and recurring, leaving me waking in a cold sweat. I told no one, not even my sister in Boston. How could he possibly know? My mind raced, searching for logical explanations. A hacker, maybe, who'd accessed my online therapy notes. But that didn't fit. I didn't use apps for that. I kept everything analog, safe in my own head. The stranger's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm not here to scare you, Madeline. I'm here because I know you, all of you, the parts you show the world, and the ones you hide even from yourself." As the minutes ticked by, the cafe's other patrons faded into the background, their murmurs blending with the storm outside. I should have called for help, but curiosity, or was it fear, kept me there. He began to weave more details, each one a thread pulling me deeper into his web. Remember that summer when you were 15, sneaking out to the old lighthouse with your friends? You found that rusted lockbox buried in the sand, filled with yellowed letters from a century ago. You never told anyone what was in them, did you? Kept one, the one about the lost sailor who predicted his own shipwreck. My mouth went dry. That box, I'd buried it back. But yes, I'd pocketed one letter, its words haunting me, predictions of doom that came true. It was still in my attic, hidden under floorboards. The man's knowledge wasn't just surface level. It was intimate, invasive, like he'd rifled through my memories while I slept. The rain intensified, thunder rumbling in the distance, shaking the windows. I glanced at my watch. Only 10 minutes had passed, but it felt like hours. He paused, sipping from a cup of black coffee that had appeared without me noticing him order it. But it's not just the past, Madeline. I know the now, and the yet to come. My pulse quickened. What did he mean? He continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that cut through the noise. Tonight, when you go home, you'll find a letter on your doorstep. Not from anyone you know. It will be in an envelope with no stamp, no address. Inside, a single sentence: "The fog hides more than you think." I laughed nervously, trying to break the spell. This is ridiculous. Who are you? How do you know these things? But he ignored my questions, his expression unchanging. And tomorrow, tomorrow, you'll wake to a phone call at exactly 7:13 a.m. It will be from a number you don't recognize, but the voice on the other end will sound like your late husband, Thomas. He'll say 3 words: "Come find me." Those words hung in the air like a fog, thick and disorienting. My mind reeled. Thomas? Impossible. He'd been gone for years, his voice a fading echo in old voicemails I'd deleted in a fit of grief. The stranger watched me, his sharp eyes gauging my reaction. I felt exposed, vulnerable, as if my life was a book he'd read cover to cover, including the unwritten chapters. The cafe door chimed as someone entered, letting in a gust of wet wind, but I barely noticed. Why me? What did he want? He didn't ask for money or favors. He just sat there, dispensing truths like poison darts. As the storm raged on, he delved deeper, recounting a childhood fear I'd long suppressed. The imaginary figure in my closet, a shadow with glowing eyes that whispered my name on windy nights. It wasn't imaginary, he said softly. It was waiting, and now, it's stirring again because you've ignored the signs. By now, my hands were trembling, the latte forgotten and cold. The man's presence was suffocating, the air around him seeming to warp, shadows lengthening unnaturally across the table. I wanted to demand answers, to shatter this illusion, but fear clamped my throat shut. Then, as if sensing my breaking point, he shifted topics, his tone almost gentle. Your mother used to tell you stories about the town's history, didn't she? About the founders who vanished in the great fog of 1892, leaving behind journals filled with prophecies. You laughed them off as fairy tales, but deep down, you wondered, those journals are real, Madeline, and one mentions you by name. My blood ran cold. My mother had passed those tales down, bedtime stories meant to thrill, not terrify. But a journal mentioning me, born over a century later? It defied reason, yet his certainty made it feel plausible, pulling me into a vortex of doubt. The thunder grew closer, lightning flashing outside, illuminating the stranger's face in stark relief. His skin looked paler now, almost translucent, veins pulsing faintly. I glanced around. The barista was wiping counters, oblivious. An elderly couple chatted in the corner, untouched by the unease enveloping me. It was as if we existed in a bubble, separate from the world. He leaned back, folding his arms. You're thinking of leaving now, aren't you? But before you do, listen. Tomorrow isn't set in stone, but it's close. After the call, you'll drive to the old lighthouse, compelled by a pull you can't explain. There, in the fog, you'll find something waiting, not Thomas, but a truth that will unravel everything. His words wrapped around me like tendrils, each one tightening the knot in my stomach. What truth? Why the lighthouse? Memories flooded back. That summer at 15, the lockbox, the letter about predictions. Was this connected? As the clock ticked toward closing time, the stranger's revelations intensified, each one a hook sinking deeper. He knew about the small scar on my left palm from a kitchen accident last year, the one I'd bandaged myself without telling anyone. He described the exact shade of blue in my favorite sweater, hanging in my closet at that very moment. And then, the dreams again. In tonight's dream, the forest will change. The branches won't just scratch. They'll whisper your future, names and dates you don't want to hear. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the chill. The cafe felt smaller, walls closing in, the rain a relentless drumbeat echoing my heartbeat. I had to get out, but his gaze held me, promising more horrors if I stayed, more questions if I left. Finally, with a deep breath, I stood, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. I don't know who you are or how you know these things, but this ends now. My voice wavered, betraying the fear coiling inside. He didn't move, just nodded slowly. Go home, Madeline. The letter awaits. And remember, tomorrow starts at dawn. I fled into the storm, rain soaking me instantly, but the cold was nothing compared to the dread settling in my bones. As I drove home, wipers slashing through the downpour, his words replayed in my mind, each one a shadow trailing me. Was he a psychic? A con artist with impeccable research? Or something worse, something from those old town legends? Pulling into my driveway on Elm Street, the house loomed dark and empty, wind whipping through the trees like mournful sighs. I hesitated at the door, heart pounding. There, on the welcome mat, sodden but unmistakable, an envelope with no stamp, no address. My hand shook as I picked it up, the paper heavy with rain. Inside, a single sentence in elegant script. The fog hides more than you think, I gasped, dropping it as if burned. How? He couldn't have placed it here. The timing didn't add up. Unless he knew I'd be home now. Inside, I locked every door, drew the curtains, but sleep evaded me. The dreams came as promised, the forest denser, branches murmuring fragments. Madeline, tomorrow, lighthouse. Morning broke gray and misty, fog blanketing the town like a shroud. I stared at the clock, willing time to slow. 7 a.m., 7:05, 7:10. My phone rang at exactly 7:13, the number unknown. With trembling fingers I answered. A voice, achingly familiar, crackled through. Come find me, Thomas. It was Thomas. Tears streamed down my face as I dropped the phone, the world tilting. Impossible. Yet here I was, grabbing my keys, drawn inexorably toward the lighthouse, the fog swallowing my car as I drove. What waited there? The stranger's truth? Or something far more terrifying? The fog was so thick that morning it felt like driving through milk, slow, deliberate, every turn of the wheel uncertain. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached, but I couldn't stop. That voice on the phone, Thomas's voice, soft and familiar like a memory pulled straight from the warmest part of my heart, kept echoing in my head. Come find me. It wasn't possible. I knew it wasn't possible. He'd been gone 5 years, cremated, scattered into the very ocean I was now driving toward. Yet here I was, pulled along by something stronger than reason, stronger than fear. The road to the old lighthouse wound along the cliffs of whispering pines, narrow and crumbling at the edges, the kind of road you only take when you have no choice. The radio stayed silent. I couldn't bear music, couldn't bear static, couldn't bear anything that might drown out the whisper in my mind asking what I thought I was doing. The parking lot at the base of the lighthouse was empty, overgrown with salt-stiff grass and littered with driftwood. No other cars, no tourists this time of year, especially not in this weather. The lighthouse itself stood abandoned decades ago after automation, its white paint peeling in long curls, the lantern room dark and blind. I sat in my car for a long minute, engine off, listening to the muffled crash of waves far below, and the low moan of wind threading through the structure. Part of me wanted to turn around, drive home, lock the doors, and pretend none of this had happened, the stranger, the letter, the call. But another part, deeper and more insistent, knew I wouldn't. I needed to see. I needed to understand why my dead husband's voice had found its way to my phone at exactly 7:13. I stepped out into the fog, pulling my coat tight around me. The air was damp and cold, carrying that sharp Atlantic bite that gets into your bones. The path up to the lighthouse was uneven stone, slick with moisture, and every footstep echoed strangely, as if the fog itself was listening. Halfway up, I stopped, heart thudding. There was something ahead, a shape moving near the base of the tower, indistinct at first, just a darker patch against the gray. I squinted, breath catching. A person? No, too still. As I drew closer, it resolved into the figure of a man sitting on the low stone wall that circled the lighthouse, facing the sea. His back was to me, shoulders hunched beneath a familiar faded trench coat. My stomach lurched. It was him, the stranger from the café. He didn't turn as I approached, didn't acknowledge me at all, just stared out into the swirling mist as if waiting for something only he could see. When I was a few feet away, my voice came out smaller than I intended. What are you doing here? He remained silent for a long moment, long enough that I wondered if he'd heard me over the wind. Then, slowly, he turned his head. Those sharp eyes found mine again, and this time there was something different in them, something almost sorrowful. You came, he said simply, as if that explained everything. I stood frozen, anger and fear twisting together. You did this. The call, the voice. How? He shook his head. A slow, deliberate motion. I didn't make the call, Madeline. I only knew it would happen. There's a difference. I wanted to scream at him, demand answers, but the words tangled in my throat. Instead, I found myself asking the question that had been burning since the cafe. Who are you? He looked back toward the ocean, the fog curling around us like living smoke. Someone who sees, he answered quietly. Someone who has always seen. The fog here, it doesn't just hide the horizon, it thins the veil, makes certain things visible that should stay hidden. His words sent a fresh chill through me, one that had nothing to do with the weather. I followed his gaze out into the gray nothingness, half expecting to see a shape emerging, a ship, a person, anything. But there was only mist, endless and impenetrable. He continued, voice low, almost conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. Your husband isn't gone the way you think, Madeline. Not entirely. Pieces linger, echoes. The sea keeps what it takes, but sometimes it gives something back. A voice, a memory, a pull. I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. That's not possible. He turned fully toward me then, and for the first time I noticed how tired he looked, lines etched deep around his eyes, skin almost translucent in the muted light. You felt it the moment the phone rang. You knew it was him, even though you told yourself it couldn't be. That's how these things work. They slip through the cracks when the veil is thin. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly aware of how isolated we were. No sounds of cars, no voices, just the wind and the distant, rhythmic crash of waves against rock. Why me? I whispered. He stood slowly, joints creaking like old wood, and took a step closer. I fought the urge to back away. Because you've always been sensitive to it, even when you denied it. The dreams, the stories your mother told, that letter you kept from the lockbox all those years ago. You were marked, Madeline, not cursed, marked, to see. He paused, letting the words settle. And now the veil is thinning for you more than ever. That's why I came. To warn you. A gust of wind whipped around us, carrying the faint, metallic tang of the sea. I shivered violently. Warn me about what? He glanced up at the lighthouse tower looming above us, its shadow somehow darker than the fog around it. What's coming isn't finished with echoes. The voice was just the beginning. It wants more. It wants you to follow. My pulse raced. Follow where? He didn't answer directly. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and drew out something small, holding it out to me. I hesitated, then took it. An old brass key, heavy and cold, its surface pitted with age and salt. The door at the top, he said. The one that's been locked since 1892. It will open for you now. I stared at the key in my palm, dread pooling in my stomach. The lantern room. Everyone in town knew the stories. How the last keeper vanished one foggy night. How strange lights had been seen up there over the years. How no one ever went inside anymore. Why would I go up there? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me with something close to pity. Because if you don't, the pulling won't stop. The dreams will worsen. The voices will find you wherever you go. And eventually, you'll come anyway. Better on your terms. While there's still a choice. I wanted to throw the key into the fog, to run back to my car and drive until the ocean was far behind me. But even as the thought formed, I felt it, that gentle, insistent tug deep in my chest, the same one that had brought me here. Thomas, or something wearing his voice. The stranger watched me silently, waiting. After what felt like an eternity, I closed my fingers around the key. What's up there? I asked. He exhaled slowly, breath visible in the cold. The truth you've been avoiding. About Thomas. About this town. About what the fog really hides. He turned away then, facing the sea again. Go now, Madeline. The tide is turning. The veil thins most at the edges of things. Dawn, dusk, high tide. You don't have long. I looked up at the tower, its spiral stairs hidden behind a weathered door at the base. My legs felt like lead, but I moved toward it anyway, the key biting into my palm. Behind me, the stranger spoke one last time, voice almost lost in the wind. Whatever you find, remember, it already knows you're coming. The door was old oak, swollen with decades of damp, but when I slid the key in, the lock turned with surprising ease, as if it had been waiting. I pushed it open, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling upward into darkness. The air that drifted down was colder than outside, carrying a faint scent I couldn't place, something old and salty and wrong. I stepped inside, pulling the door closed behind me out of some instinct I didn't understand. The click of the latch echoed up the stairs like a final heartbeat. Darkness swallowed me immediately, broken only by thin slivers of gray light filtering through cracked windows higher up. I climbed slowly, hand trailing along the damp stone wall, each step creaking beneath my weight. The higher I went, the stronger that pull became, not frightening exactly, but compelling, like a tide drawing me in. Whispers seemed to brush the edges of my hearing, too soft to make out words, but familiar somehow, like voices from a dream half remembered. Halfway up, I paused, chest tight. What was I doing? This was madness. I could still turn back, race down the stairs, drive away, maybe even leave Whispering Pines for good. But even as the thought crossed my mind, I knew I wouldn't. The key had opened more than a door. It had opened something inside me that had been locked away for years. I kept climbing. The air grew thicker, heavier, as if the fog itself had seeped into the tower. At the top, another door waited, smaller, iron-bound, with a lock that gleamed dully in the faint light. My hand trembled as I raised the key. Before I could insert it, a sound drifted through from the other side, soft, unmistakable. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps crossing the wooden floor of the lantern room. My breath caught. Someone was already up there, or something. The footsteps stopped directly in front of the door, close enough that I could almost feel the vibration through the wood. Then, clear as the day he built me that bookshelf, Thomas's voice spoke my name, not through a phone this time, but inches away, warm and real and impossible. Madeline. I froze, key hovering, every hair on my body standing on end. The pull was overwhelming now, a current I could no more resist than stop the tide. With a small, broken sound, I slid the key home and turned it. The door swung inward with a low, mournful groan that seemed to come from the bones of the lighthouse itself, and for a moment I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The lantern room stretched out before me, larger than I'd imagined, its curved walls lined with cracked glass panes that looked out into nothing but swirling fog. The massive lens in the center stood dark and silent, draped in decades of dust and cobwebs, but the air felt charged, heavy, like the moments before a storm breaks. And there, on the far side, standing with his back to me, gazing out at the invisible sea, was Thomas. Or at least, it looked like Thomas. The same broad shoulders, the same way he held his head slightly tilted when he was thinking, the same dark hair curling at the collar the way it always had. He wore the blue flannel shirt I'd bought him on our last anniversary, the one he'd been wearing the day the diagnosis came. My knees nearly buckled. Thomas? My voice cracked, barely more than a breath. He turned slowly, and the face I loved, still loved, even after all these years of grief, was there, smiling that gentle half-smile that used to make everything feel safe. His eyes were the same warm brown, but something in them was off, too still, like a reflection in water that doesn't quite move with the ripples. Madeline, he said again, and the sound of it wrapped around my heart and squeezed. It was his voice, down to the faint Maine accent he never quite lost after we moved here. You came. I knew you would. I took a hesitant step forward, the floorboards creaking beneath me, dust rising in soft clouds. Part of me wanted to run to him, to throw my arms around him and never let go, to believe this miracle. But another part, colder and more rational, held me back. This wasn't right. This couldn't be right. You're gone, I whispered. I watched them scatter your ashes. I stood on that cliff and said goodbye. His smile didn't falter, but it grew softer, almost sad. I know, love, I was there too in a way, watching you, missing you. He took a step toward me, and I instinctively stepped back, my shoulders brushing the cold iron of the doorframe. The fog outside pressed against the glass, thick and restless, tendrils curling as if trying to find a way in. How is this possible? I asked, tears blurring my vision. Thomas, no, this thing wearing Thomas, tilted his head. The sea doesn't let go easily, Madeline. You know the stories. Men lost in shipwrecks, voices heard on the wind years later. The fog here, it keeps things, holds them. Sometimes it gives them back, but never the same. His words echoed the strangers from below, and a fresh wave of dread washed over me. This wasn't a reunion. This was something else. I glanced around the room, searching for anything that might ground me in reality. Old charts lay scattered on a dusty table, yellowed with age, and in the corner sat a leather-bound journal, its cover cracked and salt-stained. My eyes locked on it. The journal from the stories, the one the last keeper was supposed to have kept until he vanished in 1892. Thomas followed my gaze and nodded. Go ahead, open it. Some things are meant to be read. My legs carried me forward almost against my will, drawn by that same pull that had brought me here. The journal was heavier than it looked, the pages brittle beneath my fingers. I opened it carefully, and there, in faded ink, were entries detailing storms, lights seen in the fog that weren't ships, voices calling from the water. And then, toward the end, a page that made my blood run cold. My name, Madeline Crawford, written in a hand that wasn't the keeper's. Below it, a date, the day Thomas died, and another date, tomorrow's date. The entry was short, chilling in its simplicity. She will come when the veil thins. The echo will call her. She will see what must be seen, and then she will choose. My hands trembled so violently the journal nearly slipped from my grasp. Thomas stood beside me now, close enough that I could feel the chill radiating from him, like standing next to an open freezer. You were always meant to find this, he said softly. The town, the lighthouse, the fog, it's all connected. Your mother knew. That's why she told you the stories. To prepare you. I turned to him, anger rising through the fear. Prepare me for what? To be haunted? To lose my mind? His expression softened further, and for a moment, he looked almost human again. No, love, to understand. Death isn't the end here. It's a doorway. And some of us, we get stuck halfway. I didn't want to leave you. The cancer took my body, but something else held on to the rest. The fog kept me, and now it wants you too. His words sank into me like ice water. The room seemed to dim, the fog outside thickening until the glass panes were completely obscured, turning the lantern room into a sealed bubble suspended in gray nothingness. What do you mean, it wants me? I asked, my voice shaking. Thomas reached out as if to touch my cheek, but his hand stopped inches away, fingers trembling. I realized then, he couldn't touch me. Not really. The veil is thinning, Madeline, more than it has in a century. The ones lost in the great fog of 1892, they're stirring. They need anchors in this world to cross over fully. Voices first, then shapes, then more. I've been fighting it, holding on to what I was. But I'm fading. If you stay, if you let it pull you in, you could keep me here, with you, forever. His eyes pleaded, and for a heartbreaking second, I wanted it. Wanted him back, no matter the cost. But then I saw it, a flicker. His face shifted, just for an instant, features blurring like a reflection disturbed by a stone skipped across water. Beneath the familiar lines, something else peered out, ancient and hungry. Not Thomas, never truly Thomas, just an echo wearing his skin. I backed away, heart pounding against my ribs. You're not him, I whispered. You're using him to get to me. The smile faded, and the temperature in the room plummeted, my breath coming in visible puffs. The fog against the windows pressed harder, swirling faster, as if agitated. Madeline, the thing said, and now the voice layered, Thomas's mixed with something older, deeper, like many voices speaking at once. Don't fight it. Join us. The sea is patient. The fog remembers. I turned and ran for the door, but it wouldn't budge. The lock had sealed again, the key still in my pocket, useless now. Panic surged as footsteps circled behind me, slow and deliberate. The journal lay open on the table, pages flipping on their own in a wind I couldn't feel. More names appeared as I watched in horror, names of people from town, some I recognized, some long dead, all dated with tomorrows that never came for them. And at the bottom of the newest page, fresh ink bleeding into the paper, my name again, and beneath it, today's date crossed out, replaced with tomorrow's. A final choice. The thing wearing Thomas's face stood between me and the windows now, the fog behind it forming shapes, faces, hands, reaching. Choose, it whispered, and the chorus of voices grew louder, filling the room, calling my name from every direction. I pressed my back to the door, tears streaming down my face, trapped in the heart of the lighthouse with the truth the stranger had warned me about. The veil wasn't just thin, it was tearing, and something on the other side had been waiting for me my entire life. Down below, far away, I thought I heard the faint creak of the outer door opening again. The stranger, perhaps, coming to see if I'd made my choice. Or maybe just the wind. The fog swallowed everything, and in that moment, I understood. There was no running from what the sea had claimed long ago. The door behind me rattled violently in its frame, as if something on the other side was trying to get in, or trying to stop whatever was already here from getting out. The voices rose to a fever pitch, overlapping, calling my name in layers that made my head throb. Thomas's voice, my mother's, children I didn't recognize, old men with accents thick as salt spray. The fog against the windows no longer swirled. It pushed, bulging inward like a living thing testing the glass for weakness. Cracks spiderwebbed across one pane with a sharp, crystalline snap that made me flinch. The thing wearing Thomas's face took another step closer, and the flicker came again, longer this time. Beneath the familiar features, eyes too dark, mouth too wide, skin shifting like smoke underwater. It wasn't just one thing anymore. It was many. Choose, it repeated, and now the chorus was inside my skull, pressing against my thoughts. Stay with us. Keep us whole. The cold was unbearable, seeping through my coat, into my bones, slowing my heartbeat to a sluggish crawl. I could feel the pull strengthening, that gentle tide turning into a riptide, dragging at my will. Part of me, the part that still woke up reaching for Thomas on his side of the bed, the part that kept his favorite mug on the counter even though I never used it, wanted to give in, to step forward, take the hand it offered, and let the fog swallow me whole. Forever with him, forever with them. No more empty house, no more nights staring at the ceiling, no more grading papers while pretending the silence didn't ache. But another part, smaller yet fiercer, screamed that this wasn't love. This was hunger. I tore my gaze away from the thing and looked back at the journal on the table. The pages had stopped flipping, open to the entry with my name. Fresh ink glistened beneath the crossed-out date, new words forming slowly, letter by letter, as if an invisible hand wrote them while I watched. She hesitates. The veil tears wider. Soon there will be no choice. My breath came in shallow gasps. I had seconds, maybe less. The glass cracked again, louder, shards tinkling to the floor as the fog began to seep through like smoke under a door. I lunged for the journal, grabbing it with both hands. It was heavier now, almost pulsing, as if alive. The thing hissed, a sound no human throat could make, and reached for me, fingers elongating into shadows that stretched across the floorboards. I flipped frantically to the last written page, the one from 1892, the keeper's final entry. The words were frantic, scrawled. They promise peace but take everything. Do not listen. Do not choose. Break the light. Break the light. The massive lens in the center of the room, dark for decades, coated in dust and grime. I didn't understand, not fully, but instinct took over. I dropped the journal and ran toward it, the floor trembling beneath my feet as if the entire tower shook with rage. The thing lunged, shadows whipping around my ankles, trying to drag me back. Cold fingers brushed my skin, burning like ice, and for a terrifying moment I stumbled, vision blurring. Images flooded my mind. Thomas laughing on our wedding day, my mother reading stories by the fire, the stranger's sorrowful eyes in the fog, all twisting, warping, promising if I just gave in, I could have them all again, forever. I screamed, kicking free, and threw myself against the lens housing. My hands found the old metal frame, rusted but solid. With strength I didn't know I had, I pushed, shoved, slammed my shoulder into it again and again. The voices rose to a deafening roar, the fog pouring through the broken pane now, filling the room with damp, choking gray. Cracks formed in the thick glass of the lens itself, spreading like frost on a window. One more shove, and it shattered. The sound was deafening, an explosive crack that drowned out every voice, every whisper. Shards rained down, glittering in the dim light, and something shifted. The pull snapped, like a rope cut clean. The shadows recoiled, the thing wearing Thomas's face contorting in agony, features melting away into nothingness. The fog retreated through the broken window as if sucked out by a sudden wind, swirling violently before dissipating into the morning air. Silence fell, heavy and sudden. I collapsed to my knees among the glass, chest heaving, tears streaming down my face. The room was empty again, just dust and broken pieces and the faint smell of salt. Thomas was gone, truly gone this time. No echo, no voice, no promise. Only the ache of loss, raw and familiar, but somehow cleaner. I don't know how long I stayed there, curled on the cold floor, sobbing for what I'd almost chosen and for what I'd finally let go. Eventually, footsteps echoed on the stairs, slow, deliberate. The door creaked open, and the stranger stood framed in it, trench coat damp with fog that was already lifting outside. He looked older than before, weary to the bone, but his sharp eyes held something like relief. He didn't come closer, just leaned against the doorframe. "You broke the light," he said quietly. "Not many have the strength." I wiped my face with shaking hands. What was that?" He glanced at the shattered lens, then out the window where patches of blue sky were beginning to show through thinning mist. The anchor. The lens focused more than ship's lights once. It focused them, the lost ones, kept the veil thin enough for them to reach through. "You severed the tie." I struggled to my feet, legs barely holding me. "And Thomas?" The stranger's expression softened. "He fought as long as he could, long enough for you to choose for both of you." He stepped aside, gesturing down the stairs. "It's over, Madeline. The fog will lift now, for good this time." I walked past him on unsteady legs, descending the spiral stairs that no longer felt oppressive. Sunlight filtered through the cracks, weak at first, then stronger, warming the stone walls. Outside, the world was emerging, the sea sparkling in the distance, gulls crying overhead, the town visible again down the cliff. The stranger followed at a distance, saying nothing more until we reached the bottom. There, he stopped and looked at me one last time. "Some doors, once closed, stay closed. Live well, Madeline Crawford. You've earned it." Before I could ask his name, or thank him, or demand to know how he knew, he turned and walked into the dispersing mist, his figure fading until only the sound of waves remained. I drove home that afternoon under a clear sky I hadn't seen in years. The house on Elm Street felt different, still empty, still quiet, but no longer haunted. I left Thomas's mug on the counter, but I started using it again. The dream stopped. The shadows in the corners stayed just shadows. And sometimes, on clear evenings, I walked to the cliffs and watched the sun set over the ocean, feeling the wind on my face without dread. Whispering Pines is changing too. People say the fog doesn't roll in as thick anymore, that the old stories are just stories now. I teach my classes, grade my papers, drink chamomile tea. And if anyone asks why I sometimes stare out the window with a small, sad smile, I just say I'm remembering someone I loved very much. Because some things the sea takes, it truly keeps. But some things, some choices, we get to keep for ourselves.